Like PBS.
Like the same people that are involved. They're involved in the same things. They're instrumentalities of the Council on Foreign Relations. And
Is that why they couldn't help me?
Right. So they're working both sides of the fence. They own all the horses in the race. So they're controlling both sides of every debate. They're controlling the opposition. They're controlling the groups that are circumventing the Constitution and giving us things like the Patriot Act. And then they're controlling the groups that are, supposed to be defending people from the abuses of government. They're controlling both groups. So the organized resistance, most of the so-called organized resistance, is actually just another instrumentality of. And the people that are the real resistance, like the people in the MOVE organization, for example, they're dealt with a little bit differently. And the people at Waco, for example, right? When you talk about organizing that type of resistance, then what happens to them? Well, they're bombed, and they have their compounds set on fire by military vehicles, and they are bombed with C4 explosives from helicopters, and they fired thousands of rounds of ammunition at. That's the way they deal with the real organized resistance. The only organized resistance that they're going to tolerate is the one that they're working themselves, the ones that they're pretending to bring against their own policies and actions.
You mentioned there's 6 billion slaves in the world, right? If 5.5 billion of them knew something was wrong and they know it's wrong, what could they do about it?
Well, in the past we could have changed things. In the past, you remember the Vietnam War and everybody was rebelling and there were protests and they were, but now they're dumbing down America. They have the dumbest programs on TV and people watch them. Your average person now is slow. They're not we don't have intelligent people anymore. We don't have fighters.
But that's because it's what the government wants.
Yeah, of course. Of course. They deliberately put these dumb shows on TV. And you were talking about sports before. The sports fanatics, what do? They're glued to the television. They don't have, try to get a life, read a book, do what you do, playing such beautiful music and reading all the time. They don't do that. So they've created a society that is not willing to fight back. So whatever you tell them, they're going to do it. And with the attitude you just mentioned, what can I do? But they didn't do that in Vietnam. Vietnam, our kids fought, and even when the military killed students, even when they killed them and they got shots of it on TV, the kids were still protesting. There was no fear, they believed what was right, and they fought for it. You don't get that anymore. And nobody is fighting, except for us. We're always going back at them. But how many people are like you? You know?
Yeah, people talk about it, but they're not doing anything active.
I think one of the reasons there's not too many people like you is because most of them realize after a while they're beating their head against the wall.
No, I've made differences though. I've gotten
Well, you happen to, but a lot of people that feel it's time to change things, have tried and have run into a stone wall, and they've just given up.
That's the real truth, they're giving up.
Yeah.
They're giving up. Giving up.
Because they felt it was hopeless. That's why they gave up. Joe was talking about something a little while ago about actually controlling the population, agricultural means or other means, injecting people and things that eventually is going to kill them. And I saw a program on television last week. It was on Russian television. It wasn't on American television. Channel 135, if you have time,
Yeah, I do.
Well, it's called the RT channel, Russia Today. And it's actually in English, it's from Moscow. And on this program last week, they showed Ukrainians not celebrating but commemorating the 7th year of a man-made famine that killed between 7,000 and 9,000 Ukrainians in 1933. Of course, 1933, the whole world was in a depression.
Right.
And Joe looked into it, he found it was and on this program they mentioned the fact that it was the Russian government is created this man-made famine to punish the Ukrainians. And when Joe looked it up, and that's exactly what he found.
Well, I found both sides of his argument. I found that there was like the crisis or the situation was maybe over-reported, like I drew the example of the gulags, like how many people that were led to believe that perished in the gulags, because that was distributed by people who wanted to poison in Russia. So that was reported by people who had like anti-Russian or anti-communist or anti-socialist sentiments. And that reporting of that, of the massive quantity of people, right, that was engineered to poison people's minds against those types of ideas, so-called socialist ideas. And then like Michael Parenti in that book, Black Shirts and Reds, where Michael Parenti is, he considers himself a socialist. So he says that he talks about how access was given to certain records, like in the 1970s. And it says the Russians kept very meticulous records of the people who had perished in the death camps, like the Nazis, but even more meticulous records than the Nazis kept. And he said that the result of that was, showed that there was like maybe several 100,000 people as compared to like tens of millions of people. It was really like a drastically reduced number from the official number of people dead that were reported. So, this is another one of those situations. Like, it's the reporting about it and the information about it is so contradictory and in conflict with each, the next piece of information, that it's hard to know what really unfolded there.
It just goes to show how it can be manipulated, how a government can create a man-made famine to eliminate a whole population of people.
And the whole thing was like second-story arguments anyway, because after all, it's said and done. Who funded the so-called Bolshevik Revolution? Well, the same people that were in positions of power and control in the so-called Western nations, the so-called Western powers. The Rothschilds and the international bankers and the Habsburgs and the Kuhn and Loeb and the list goes on and on. Morgans and the Rockefellers. These are the people that funded the Bolshevik Revolution. So why would they fund the Bolshevik Revolution?